Hello everyone and welcome to this video analysing Act 3 Scene 1. Well, after his secret marriage to Juliet in the previous scene, Romeo is instantly forced to face the reality of the fact that he's married a Capulet. In Act 3 Scene 1, Tybalt is hunting for Romeo. He wants to fight him for sneaking into the Capulet family party. And now that he's married into the family of his previous enemies, Romeo wants to avoid a fight. That's pretty much where we start this scene. Well, first off, let's take a little look at some things to do with dramatic structure. It was the German novelist Gustav Freytag who created the suggestion that you see on the screen that all drama falls into 5 different sort of pieces: the exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and denouement. And he suggested that every single act corresponds to one of these pieces. So Act 1 will be the exposition, where we are introduced to the setting and main characters. Act 2 will be the rising action, where a series of events keep the reader interested. Act 3 will be the climax. The main character comes face to face with the conflict and has a choice to make. Act 4 will be the falling action. The conflict unravels and the hero either wins or loses. And Act 5 will be the denouement, which is the fallout from the way the characters deal with the climax. Now, if we apply that to the play Romeo and Juliet, then we can suggest that we are about to be in here in Act 3 Scene 1, the climax, the big moment, everything's building up to it, where the main character, Romeo, comes face to face with conflict and has a choice to make. So following this dramatic structure of Freytag's pyramid, we expect some stuff to kick off in this scene, and we're not disappointed. If we apply the pyramid to Romeo and Juliet in Act 1, the audience discover that the Montague and Capulet families are enemies and they fight. In Act 2, Romeo and Juliet fall in love and get married. And of course in Act 3, which we're about to analyse now, well, it all happens, doesn't it? Romeo, Tybalt and Mercutio get into a big fight. So, you know, everything is chaos in this scene, and it sure is the climax. So if you're ever writing about scenes in your analysis, in your essays or your coursework or whatever, and you want to write about structure, you can just reference where it comes from in terms of the structure. So you can say, you know, this moment in Act 3 is the climax of the play, you know, so you can actually reference where the scenes come from. Now, what I want to do in this video is talk to you about the different types of sort of verse that are used in this scene. There's blank verse, rhymed verse, and prose. Now, one of the things I've found with Shakespeare is that the definitions of these are often so confusing. So I've tried to really simplify what these things mean, okay? So blank verse is where lines are written in a sort of rhythm. They have 10 syllables per line, but they don't rhyme. So if you're looking for blank verse, it's where characters' lines have 10 syllables. It's iambic pentameter with one stressed syllable followed by one unstressed. But if you don't understand that bit, just look for lines that have 10 syllables per line, but they don't rhyme at the end. Now, rhymed verse are obviously lines which rhyme, and they're often in Shakespeare's plays rhyming couplets, 2 lines, where the final word of each pair of lines rhymes. But rhymed verse are lines that rhyme, and prose is ordinary written language where there's no rhyme or metrical structure at all. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you examples of all of these in the Act 3 Scene 1. I'm going to do a little bit of analysis of why they're used, because Shakespeare's such a genius when it comes to language. There's so much that you can take from these sort of subtle things. So what I tell you now that we see in this scene, you can apply it to the rest of the play. Well, here's an example of Benvolio and Mercutio. Benvolio says, "I pray thee, good Mercutio, let's retire. The day is hot, the Capulets abroad, and if we meet, we shall not scape a brawl, for now these hot days is the mad blood stirring." That's an example of blank verse. It's iambic pentameter, 10 syllables per line, and it's unrhymed. So although there's 10 syllables in each line, the lines don't rhyme. Then Mercutio says, "Thou art like one of those fellows that when he enters the confines of a tavern, claps his sword upon the table and says, 'God send me no need of thee,' and by the operation of the second cup draws it on the drawer, when indeed there is no need. And hopefully you can see straight away that this is an example of prose. It's ordinary written language. There's no rhyme, there's no metrical structure. It's just written like anything a page from a normal storybook. But it's used to symbolize something important about the character of Mercutio, because Mercutio is pretty much the only character who always or almost always talks in prose in this play. And this is a sign of informality in Shakespeare's work, not of lower class, because in his plays, for example in Hamlet, Hamlet himself often talks in prose, but it shows that he is different, he stands out from the rest, and his language use is uncontrolled and unpredictable. And of course all of that is a reflection of the character of Mercutio. He is different, he does stand out from the rest, he is uncontrolled, and he is unpredictable. So the actual form of writing and the use of language here reflects the type of character that Mercutio is. It's very, very clever. When Tybalt and Mercutio are arguing, Tybalt says, "Follow me close, for I will speak to them. Gentlemen, good then, a word with one of you." Now that is blank verse, 10 syllables per line, but it's not rhyming. Mercutio answers, again, in prose, and "but one word with one of us, couple it with something, make it a word and a blow." So this prose is informal and a bit disrespectful to Tybalt, and is coupled with the kind of innuendo and double meaning that he's using here. Now Tybalt's reply is fascinating. "You shall find me apt enough to that, sir, and you will give me occasion." So Tybalt then switches to prose himself. So Tybalt starts in blank verse, then he switches to prose after Mercutio does. And this suggests that Tybalt is being drawn in by Mercutio. He's getting wound up, drawn into the argument. Mercutio is trying to argue with Tybalt, and Tybalt is being drawn into this argument. So not only do you analyse the type of language and the type of verse being used, but you also look at how it changes throughout the piece and the changes that are reflected in a character because of that. And then right at the end, after Tybalt and Mercutio are now dead, we have Lady Capulet say, "He is a kinsman to the Montague. Affection makes him false, he speaks not true. Some 20 of them fought in this black strife, and all those 20 could but kill one life. I beg for justice which thou, prince, must give. Romeo slew Tybalt, Romeo must not live." And the prince says, "Romeo slew him, he slew Mercutio. Who now the price of his dear blood doth owe?" And then Montague says, "Not Romeo, prince, he was Mercutio's friend. His fault concludes, but what the law should end." So you can see here that all of these characters are talking in rhyming verse. Now, rhyming verse throughout the work of Shakespeare is often used when characters are giving advice or pointing out a sort of moral or a deep message of the piece, which is definitely what's happening here. But also, by talking in a very distinct and different way, it shows how these characters are distinct and different. They're actually set apart from those who were involved in the fight. So that's just one way that blank verse, rhyming verse, and prose is used in this scene alone, and how it suggests something symbolic about the characters. And you can look for it in all of the other scenes and kind of work out, what you want to say about it. Now, other things to say about Act 3, Scene 1, and this is all in the ebook as well. Pick it up, the link's in the description for £1.99. But Romeo wants to avoid the fight, of course, in this scene with Tybalt, and he actually uses language that seems more fitting to his previous conversations with Juliet. He tells Tybalt he does, and here's the quote, "love thee better than thou canst devise." Now that line is very similar to what he said previously about Juliet in Act 2, Scene 2, where he said, "It is my love, oh that she knew she were." So in both examples, Romeo actually loves someone who doesn't know that he loves them, and he wishes that they did. And this mirroring of language is used to show what a dramatic change Romeo has undertaken. His bawdy banter's gone, his anger towards the Capulets has gone, and now all he feels is love. But this is a very tense scene, and it's very clever how the sort of tension is increased, because the structure of the scene is very tense, because Romeo at first, of course, tries to stop the fighting between Mercutio and Tybalt. He asks his kinsman to put thy rapier up, and in terms of dramatic tension, the audience would feel a sense of disappointment at this. They would want to shout out, "Oh, Romeo, kill him." But then it makes it more satisfying when later on he does eventually kill Tybalt. And this sort of delayed gratification where we want something to happen makes it all the more powerful. And finally, as Mercutio is dying, he delivers one of the most famous lines from the play. He says, "A plague on both your houses." And this is another example of Shakespeare foreshadowing, hinting at what's going to come later, because of course there will be a disaster which comes upon both the Capulet and Montague houses in the family, both of those families, and we'll see that with Romeo and Juliet in Act 5, Scene 3. So everything that you've seen me talk about in this video, it's all written down in detail in my ebook, which also contains a line-by-line translation of the play into modern English and videos like this all the way through. So please do follow the links in the description, pick up a copy, like, comment, share, it really helps out. Thanks.